The rain hammered against the windows of our small cottage in the Cotswolds, mimicking the storm brewing inside me. For 20 years, Ingrid and I had built a life here, a quiet, predictable life that suited me perfectly. Barnaby, a simple IT consultant, found solace in the routine, the predictability of code, and the unwavering love I believed Ingrid and I shared. I am 46 years old. Or so I thought. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Ingrid, a librarian always meticulous and organized, began leaving her phone face down on the table. Her laughter on evening calls became hushed, secretive. When I entered the room, the conversations would abruptly end with a cheery, "Okay, talk to you later." I chalked it up to work, a new book club, anything but what my gut was screaming at me. Then came the late nights at the library. "Extra hours, Barnaby, the annual inventory," she'd say, her eyes flitting away from mine. I'd offer to make her dinner, leave it warming in the oven, only to find it untouched when I went to bed. She'd arrive home exhausted, barely able to string a sentence together, collapsing into bed without so much as a good-night kiss. My unease grew into annoying anxiety. I started losing sleep, replaying our conversations, searching for clues, for something, anything, to confirm or deny my growing suspicions. I felt like I was losing my mind. One Saturday, Ingrid told me she was going to a conference in Bristol. "It's a big one, Barnaby. All the librarians from the region will be there. Networking, you know." She kissed me quickly on the cheek, grabbed her suitcase, and was gone. That afternoon, I decided to surprise her. I knew she loved the small tea shop near the Bristol Conference Center. I thought I'd meet her for a quick lunch, a sweet gesture to show her I was thinking of her. The drive was pleasant, the countryside a patchwork of green fields and quaint villages. I even started to feel a little foolish for my paranoia. Maybe I was just overreacting. As I approached the tea shop, I saw Ingrid through the window. My heart leaped with a surge of affection. But then I saw who she was with. A man. Not just any man, but Lars, our neighbor. Lars, the charming, handsome architect who had helped us design our garden last summer. Lars, who Ingrid had always seemed a little too friendly with. They were holding hands across the table, their fingers intertwined. Ingrid was laughing, a genuine, carefree laugh I hadn't heard in months. She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling, and said something I couldn't hear, but the way she looked at him, it was unmistakable. It was the way she used to look at me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a searing pain in my chest, a physical ache that stole the air from my lungs. I stood there frozen, watching them, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. This wasn't a conference. This wasn't networking. This was betrayal, raw, agonizing betrayal. I stumbled back to my car, my vision blurred with tears. I drove home in a daze, the rain now a torrential downpour, mirroring the storm raging inside me. I parked the car, went inside, and sat in the living room staring blankly at the fireplace. The fire had long gone out, leaving only cold ashes behind, just like our marriage. When Ingrid finally came home late that evening, her face flushed, her eyes bright, she found me sitting in the dark. "Barnaby, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with false concern. I stood up, my legs shaky, and looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long time. I saw the lie in her eyes, the guilt hidden beneath a veneer of innocence. "I saw you, Ingrid," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw you with Lars." Her face paled. "Barnaby," she stammered, searching for an explanation, a lie to cover her tracks. "Don't," I said, cutting her off. "Just don't. I don't want to hear it. It's not what you think," she pleaded, her eyes welling up with tears. "Oh, I think it is exactly what I think," I said, my voice rising. "You lied to me, Ingrid. You betrayed me. After 20 years, you threw it all away for him. It just happened," she said, her voice choked with sobs. "We just connected," I repeated, incredulous. "You connected? What about us, Ingrid? What about the life we built together? Was that all a lie?" She didn't answer. She couldn't answer, because she knew deep down that it was. That our life, our love, had been a lie for a long time. I turned and walked away, out of the house, out of our life. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there, not for another minute. The rain was still falling, washing away the remnants of a life that had been shattered into a million pieces. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of grief and anger. I stayed at a small hotel in a nearby town, trying to make sense of what had happened. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I just replayed the scene in the tea shop over and over in my mind, each time feeling the pain anew. My friend Crispin tried to be supportive, but he didn't understand. "Just forgive her, Barnaby," he'd say. "Everyone makes mistakes." This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act of betrayal. This was a knife to the heart. I decided I couldn't stay in the Cotswolds. The memories were too painful, the reminders too constant. I sold the cottage, packed my belongings, and moved to London. I needed a fresh start, a clean break from the life I had known. In London, I threw myself into my work, burying my pain in lines of code. I worked long hours, often late into the night, trying to exhaust myself into oblivion. It helped a little, but the emptiness was always there, a constant ache in my soul. One evening, a few months after I had moved, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it, but something compelled me to pick up. "Hello, Barnaby," a woman's voice said. "Yes, speaking," I replied. "This is Braunt, Lars' wife." My heart skipped a beat. "Lars' wife?" I repeated, incredulous. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "I know about Ingrid." I didn't say anything. I just waited for her to continue. "He told me everything," she said. "He left me for her." "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing what else to say. "I'm not calling for your sympathy, Barnaby," she said, her voice hardening. "I'm calling because I need your help." "My help?" I asked, confused. "Yes," she said. "I want to make them pay." That's how I found myself embroiled in a plot for revenge. Braun and I spent weeks planning, strategizing, gathering information. We discovered that Lars had been embezzling money from his firm, using it to fund his lavish lifestyle and his affair with Ingrid. We decided to expose him. Braun leaked the information to the authorities, providing them with all the evidence they needed. The police raided Lars' office, arrested him, and charged him with fraud and embezzlement. Ingrid was devastated. She had left me for a man who was not only a cheater but also a criminal. She had thrown away her life for nothing. She tried to contact me, to apologize, to explain, but I refused to speak to her. I had nothing left to say. Lars was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Ingrid lost her job at the library. She was ostracized by her friends and family. Her life was in ruins. Was I happy? I don't know. I felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that they had both paid for their betrayal. But it didn't bring me any joy. It didn't fill the emptiness inside me. The revenge didn't heal me. It didn't bring Ingrid back. It didn't erase the pain. I was still alone, still heartbroken, still trying to piece together the fragments of my shattered life. One day I was walking through a park in London when I saw a young woman sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook. Her name was Alara, an artist. We started talking, and I found myself drawn to her warmth, her kindness, her genuine spirit. We started dating, and slowly, tentatively, I began to open my heart again. Alara helped me to see that not all women were like Ingrid, that there was still love and happiness to be found in the world. It wasn't easy. The scars of Ingrid's betrayal ran deep, but with Alara's help, I started to heal. I started to trust again. I started to believe in love again. One evening, as we were sitting by the fire in my new apartment, Alara turned to me and said, "You know, Barnaby, you deserve to be happy." For the first time in a long time, I believed her. I finally understood that revenge wasn't the answer, that the only way to truly heal was to forgive, not for Ingrid's sake, but for my own. I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger and resentment that had been poisoning my soul. I moved on with my life. I found happiness with Alara. I built a new life, a life filled with love, trust, and honesty. Ingrid, on the other hand, remained trapped in her own personal hell. She lost everything, and she had no one to blame but herself. I heard through the grapevine that she eventually moved away from the Cotswolds, seeking a fresh start of her own. I don't know what happened to her, and frankly, I don't care. I had my own life to live, my own happiness to pursue. The rain still falls sometimes, and when it does, I think of that day in the tea shop, the day my world fell apart. But now the pain is not as sharp, the memories not as vivid. Now I see it as a turning point, a catalyst that forced me to leave behind a life that was no longer serving me, and to embrace a future filled with possibilities. And for that I am grateful. Years later, I received a letter. It was postmarked from a small town in Ireland. The return address was simply I. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, in Ingrid's familiar handwriting, were two words: "I'm sorry." I stared at the words for a long time, a wave of emotions washing over me. Sadness, anger, pity, and finally forgiveness. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. It was a relic of a past I had long since left behind. I went back to Alara, who was waiting for me by the fire. I wrapped my arms around her and held her close. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "Everything's perfect," I said, and I meant it. My story is not one of revenge, but of survival. It's a story of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. It's a story of finding love again, even after the deepest wounds. It's a story of learning to forgive, not for the sake of the one who wronged you, but for the sake of your own soul. I hope my story helps anyone that is going through the same. Remember, there is light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see it right now. Have faith and never give up on yourself. You deserve to be happy, and you will be eventually. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time. Years passed. Alara and I married, built a beautiful life together filled with joy, laughter, and unwavering support. We traveled the world, explored new cultures, and created memories that would last a lifetime. The scars of my past slowly faded, replaced by the warmth of Alara's love and the promise of a brighter future. One crisp autumn afternoon, while strolling through Hampstead Heath, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Crispin, my old friend from the Cotswolds. His voice was subdued, laced with a hint of sadness. "Barnaby, I have some news," he began hesitantly. "It's about Ingrid." A familiar pang of unease shot through me, but I braced myself and urged him to continue. "Passed away," Crispin revealed softly. "A sudden illness. It was quick." A wave of complex emotions washed over me: shock, sorrow, and a strange sense of closure. Despite the pain she had caused, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for the woman I had once loved. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, my voice tinged with a mixture of sincerity and detachment. "There's more," Crispin added, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Before she died, she asked me to give you something. A letter." He explained that Ingrid had left a sealed envelope with him, instructing him to deliver it to me in the event of her death. I agreed to meet him the following day at a quiet cafe in Primrose Hill. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Crispin was already there, waiting for me at a secluded table. He handed me a worn, cream-colored envelope with my name scrawled across the front in Ingrid's unmistakable handwriting. "I think you should read this in private, Barnaby," Crispin advised gently. "It seems personal." I nodded, thanked him, and retreated to a quiet corner of the cafe. With trembling hands, I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. As I began to read Ingrid's final words, a flood of memories and emotions surged through me. She wrote of her deep regret for the pain she had caused, her remorse for the betrayal that had shattered our marriage, and her enduring love for me, a love that she realized too late was the most precious thing in her life. She confessed that her affair with Lars had been a desperate attempt to escape the monotony and predictability of our life together, a misguided search for excitement and validation. But she soon discovered that what she truly craved was the security, stability, and unconditional love that I had always provided. She acknowledged that her actions had been selfish and destructive, and that she had no right to ask for my forgiveness. But she hoped that, in time, I would be able to understand the depth of her regret and the sincerity of her apology. She concluded the letter by wishing me happiness and peace, and by expressing her gratitude for the years we had shared together. She signed it simply, "With love always, Ingrid." Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading her letter. A wave of compassion washed over me, erasing the last vestiges of anger and resentment. I realized that Ingrid had been a flawed and imperfect human being, just like all of us. She had made a terrible mistake, but she had also suffered the consequences of her actions. In that moment, I truly forgave her, not just for my sake, but for hers as well. I released her from the burden of her guilt and set her free to find peace in the afterlife. I left the cafe feeling lighter than I had in years. A sense of closure had settled over me, allowing me to finally move on from the past and embrace the future with a renewed sense of hope and optimism. I returned home to Alara, who greeted me with a warm embrace and a knowing smile. I shared Ingrid's letter with her, and together we mourned the loss of a life that could have been. That evening, as we sat by the fire, Alara turned to me and said, "You know, Barnaby, you're a truly remarkable man. You've been through so much, and yet you've emerged stronger and more compassionate than ever before." I smiled, grateful for her unwavering love and support. "I couldn't have done it without you, Alara," I replied softly. "You've shown me what it truly means to love and be loved." So, my story continues, not as a tale of revenge or bitterness, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of forgiveness. It's a story of finding light in the darkness, of learning to heal from the deepest wounds, and of embracing a future filled with love, joy, and endless possibilities. I hope that by sharing my experiences, I can offer solace and inspiration to others who have been betrayed or heartbroken. Remember, you are not alone. There is hope for healing, for forgiveness, and for finding love again. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time, and never lose faith in the power of the human heart.